If you're looking for high-end rustic Christmas decor, but don't want to spend high-end money, listen up. I saw this awesome cedar Christmas tree selling online for over $150. And I thought, nope, I can build that. In this video, I'm going to show you how I built this tree and matching basket set for under $25. That's right, under $25 in materials. This is a super easy step-by-step DIY for all skill levels. Now grab your cedar pickets and let's get building. For this entire project, I will actually be using 7 1x6x6 foot cedar pickets. Now these have the dog ears on them, so we will be eliminating these from the equation. These I picked up at Menards. They cost about $3.45. So for all 7 of these, it was under $25. Now, if you didn't want to build the whole package with the basket, if you will, then you would probably end up needing 4 of these, which would be under $15. Still, phenomenal price, and a whole lot better than spending $90 to $200 for a finished product. As usual, I'm going to go ahead and have my cut list on the screen for you to reference at any time. I will be breaking these parts down by board. That is how they're going to be listed on the cut list. So with that said, let's head over to the saw and start cutting. So for each one of these boards, I'm going to square off the factory edge just so that way I have a nice clean edge to start with. So for my first cut, I'm going to need 2 pieces at 28 inches. And the last cut for board number 1 is going to be at 14 inches. Board number 2, first piece is going to be 23 inches. The next one will be at 21 inches. Now as I stack these, I'm actually keeping them stacked in the order in which they're cut. So I'm keeping them separated by board. So I already cut all of board 1, and so now I'll be stacking all of board 2 together as I did with board 1. And the last piece for board 2 is 17 inches. And I will be hanging on to all of my scrap pieces just because I will likely end up using a vast majority of them later on in the project. First cut for board 3 will be at 12 inches. Second piece will be 10 inches, followed by 8 inches, 4 inches, and then 2 at 11 inches. Board number 4, we just need 1 piece at 48 inches, but we're going to keep the fall piece. Board number 5, we want 2 at 24 1/4. Board number 6, we want 2 at 23 inches. Now board number 7, we're just going to square up the end because this one is actually going to get ripped on the table saw first, and then we'll come back over here to the miter saw and chop it up into the proper lengths. So now we've gotten all of our initial cuts done on the miter saw. We've kept everything in the order in which they were cut, starting with our first board all the way down here to our 7th board, and then we've got our stack of fall or scraps from each one of these boards. We will be utilizing these here in just a little bit. Now we're going to head over to the table saw and get all of these boards ripped into the proper width. We're now going to take all of our pieces from boards 1, 2, 3, and 6 and rip those down into 2 3/16 inch pieces. We're going to get 2 strips out of each board. All right. Okay, now we want to take our 48-inch piece that we got from board 4 and rip it to 3 inches. We're only going to need the one piece. Now we're going to take our board 7, which all we did was square up the end on it. We are going to take it along with our 3 of our largest scrap pieces and rip those down to 1 3/4 inches. We should get 3 strips out of each board. Now it's time to cut all of these 1 3/4 inch strips into our lengths. We're going to end up with 3 different lengths. We're going to end up with, let's see, 10 5/8, 10 1/8, and 9 5/8. Now I'll go ahead and just put the quantities on the cut list so that way you can just start getting those chopped up. If you have the capabilities to do a stop block, this would be a great opportunity to do that. I don't have my stop block system set up yet, so I'm just going to have to measure, mark, and cut. Now that we have everything cut to the proper length and width, we need to set a few pieces aside. We want to set aside our full width 24 1/4, along with our 4 23-inch pieces and our 4 11-inch pieces. These are what's going to make up our basket, along with those 1 3/4 strips that we just got done ripping down. So to not confuse anyone anymore, I'm going to set these aside. We'll get back to those here in just a little bit. All right, so now we want to get going on our tree. I ended up cutting just a 1.5 inch spacer. This will be utilized when spacing out the, I guess, what are going to make up the ribbons on the tree. We're going to start with our little 4-inch piece towards the top. We're just going to call this the top, that the bottom, just to make things easier. So we're going to start with our 4-inch piece, and of course this is roughly 5.5 inches wide, so we want to just give a rough mark on center, which is going to be 2 3/4, just so we have a basic reference point so we can get this thing centered approximately. And we know that this board is 3 inches, so we know that center is going to be 1.5 inches. If you had a Sharpie, you could mark that. So I'm just going to take my Sharpie and mark just an easy reference, 1.5 inches, just so that way it's just a little quicker referencing my 1.5 inch mark while centering these pieces. So I'm just going to take this and our rough pencil mark on here. You may not be able to see that on camera, but we're just going to do a basic mark on here. And we just want to make sure that that piece is square, or at least close to it. Now, none of this is like exact, really close counts with this. So we're just going to do that roughly like so. Now, if I was a smart person, I would have went ahead and got my glue and brad nails ready. So let me go ahead and get that. That way I don't have to do this again, but I'm not a smart person. I will be using my cordless brad nailer. This is just 18 gauge brad nails. They are 1 inch long. So since we're working with 2 5/8 inch material, we should be able to shoot the 1 inch brad nails without any issues. I am using a Typon 3 glue, just so that way it holds up to the weather since this will be outside. So let's just go ahead and apply some glue to this. Just stay conscious of where this is going to be placed on here. No need to go crazy with the glue. And then just a few nails to hold. All right, now we're going to take our spacer and move on to the next block. Now, how we are going to do this after we get our first one on here is we're then just going to work our way down the tree, going in order from shortest to longest. Now, there are 2 of each size, except for the largest one. We actually have 4, but that's just because that's the way the math works out. That's what we need. So we actually only need half of these for the initial set of branches, if you will. So I'm actually just going to separate all of this into 2 separate stacks. Just going to mark rough center on each one of these. This next one is 8 inches, so I'm just going to do an easy reference on 4. Throw my spacer on there. Utilize my square. Forget my glue again. And now I'm just going to continue this process all the way down. Now that we have our first layer of branches on our tree, we're going to move on to the actual ribbon or wrapping portion of it. In order to accomplish this, we are going to start at the bottom with our longest piece, and we are going to match the bottom corner of the bottom one and close to the bottom corner of the next one up. And then we are going to just continue doing so all the way up the tree. We just want to hit the bottom corner, so on and so forth, all the way up. About like that, except I'm going to glue it and nail it. You get the idea. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing this is kind of got to keep an eye on where these boards are actually going to be overlapping each other, so you know exactly where you need to put the glue and where you can actually shoot your nails. So just keep that in mind as you're going through this process. Now that all of our strips have been glued and nailed to the tree, we can now work on the detail portion, which is to actually make it look like a tree. I am making a mark 2.5 inches from each side. So making a mark here and from that side, and then also making a mark from this side. That will give me a reference, and again, these are rough reference marks. So I'm just going to use my straight edge to line it up with the corner of this one here, and then line it up with my outside reference mark that I just made on the top. So at this point, every single one of these should be covered with our straight edge. So we can just take our line and just make a mark on each one. Now, if you have a track saw, that would be ideal. You know, you can just line this up with your track saw and then just send it. I don't have a track saw, so I'm just going to freehand this thing with my circular saw. We're just going to make our same marks on our other side. So now that it's actually in the shape of the tree, now move forward with the basket portion. I'm going to start the basket build with our 11-inch pieces and 23-inch pieces. They are going to make up the rectangular frame that we'll call them pickets, will end up nailing to after. So let's go ahead and get these. I'm going to go ahead and set 2 of each size aside and kind of get these laid out here. What we're going to end up doing is, to start, the 11-inch pieces are going to cap the 23-inch pieces on both ends. Just like so. Now I'm going to go ahead and get these glued and nailed together. So I'm going to do the first one, and then I'll go ahead and just jump in and do the second one. Now that we've got both of our frames nailed and glued together, we are going to just double check square on one of them, making sure that everything looks good. Definitely want it to be square. Everything looks good on this one. Perfect. And we're going to now take our 2 full width 24¼ inch pieces. They are going to get glued and nailed to one of these, making sure that everything is flush on the outside. Now you will end up with just a slight gap right in the middle. That's okay. I'm now going to get these glued and nailed on here just as they sit, and then we will move on to the other portion. Alright, go ahead and flip this over now. Now we've got our bottom here. I'm going to go ahead and clean up any glue squeeze out that we have. I don't want to see any of that. It's now time to start putting on our pickets. We will be using the 3 different sizes that we have, at least in the design that I put out there. The links that we're using are the 10 5/8, 10 1/8, and 9 5/8. I ended up cutting a couple spacers just at 3 5/8. They are just going to help me with my vertical spacing, just to hold this part on here until I get enough pickets in place to hold this thing in place. I'm going to start with my corners, and my front will overlap the side. So if this is the front, this is our side, and we're going to take this and install it just like so. And we're going to do that on all 4 corners, and then we will get this other frame installed. And the pickets that go on the corner will be the 10 5/8 pickets. I'm going to install my side picket first, then I'll install the one that goes on the front. That way. Just want to make sure everything is flush on the side before installing. Then I'm just using this front picket and flushing it to the outside of the side picket. All right, I'm just going to do that on the remaining 3 corners. Next up, we're going to install our upper frame, and this is where I'm going to utilize those little spacer blocks. I am just going to put them on opposite corners, so I'm just going to put one here and put one over here. And then I'm just going to hold these little blocks in place with just a couple spring clamps, just so that way they don't move. I'm not fighting them. This should be able to squeeze right on in here. Just like so. Just going to take a little pencil and just give a little mark just on the bottom here, just a tiny little reference point, just so that way I can pull this back off of here and put a little glue in. Before nailing it in place, you can just pull a little measurement just to make sure that these things are sitting where they should, since we don't have spacers for them. Good. Now just nail. Now that our upper frame is all secured, we're going to tip it onto its back and start the installation of the pickets on the front of it. I'm going to take my one remaining 10 5/8 picket, and we'll start in the center and work our way out. But first, I want to make a couple reference marks. So I want to find the center of my basket. Looks like we are 21 7/8 inside to inside. So 21 7/8 half of that should be 10 15/16. Close counts. So we'll go 10 15/16 on that. And I'm only going to mark the bottom because then we're going to use our square for our initial piece. Now I want to take one remaining 10 5/8 long piece. We are 1 3/4 wide. So center of that is going to be 7/8. So I'm just going to make one little tick mark on the bottom here. And I'm just going to line up my 2 marks right there and use my square to make sure it's perpendicular. About like that. Now nail it, please. I'm going to take the 2 spacer blocks that I used earlier to support the upper frame, and I can use these as my width spacers. I want a 5/8 space between each one of these. So I'm now going to just go to each side of my centerpiece, and then use my square just to make sure everything stays square. Now that we have the front done, we're going to do the same thing on the sides. We are going to mark center and then use one of our short pieces, or 9 and 5/8 inch pieces, to mark where our center is. That'll be our first one, and then we'll just split the difference for 2 medium-sized pieces on each side. I'm only going to put 1 brad nail in here, so then I can pull a measurement and make sure that this is centered between the opening. Now I'm just going to take 2 medium-sized pieces and just split the gap. Now we're just going to do the same thing on the other side. Now that our front and our sides are all finished, we now want to focus our attention on the back. So since the trunk of our tree is 3 inches wide, I want to find the center of this, and then I want to create just a hair over 3-inch gap right in the middle. So that way I can start my fence pickets on each side of the tree trunk. So I'm just gonna once again find center. Then I want to mark 1.5 inches on each side of that mark. Now that I've got reference marks for the center of this, I can now start on each side of that with my 2 medium size, and they are just going to end up right next to the tree trunk, about like so, and then we'll move to, and then we'll just continue our same pattern as we did on the front. So we'll go medium size, short, short, medium. So that's it for our basket assembly. I'm going to transition back to the tree because I need to get the star cut out for the top of the tree. Now for the star, this is where you can just kind of, do what you want. I decided to go with the Star of Bethlehem, without getting, too much into it. I'm very much a believer Jesus is the reason for the season. So I am going to go with that option. I am just going to trace it out on a couple pieces of scrap cedar, just like so, and then I will use the jigsaw to get it cut out. Our tree is built, our basket is built, the star is cut out, but before we put the star on the top of the tree, I want to go ahead and get the tree mounted to the basket. Now I will be utilizing 4 1-inch screws to run through the back of it here. I am not going to glue it because I want the tree to be removable, so that way it stores easier in the off season. Once I'm done with that, I will get it moved outside, get the star installed for the final reveal.